guys, welcome back to our listing management series. Dylan here.
And Angela.
And we're jumping into our third episode today, and that's the art of strategic pricing. I think it's been a while since we've had to really be pricing experts.
Yeah.
I think we've discussed why. We understand the shifts in eras that have occurred.
Yep.
And I think the best way to frame this for me is I think we need to figure out how to be pricing consultants again.
100%, yeah.
And shift away from working to try and predict the price that properties are actually going to sell at.
Yeah.
So I've called this consultative, not predictive pricing. And maybe the best way to frame this is when I think of pricing over the years, there have been times where there's a significant amount of inventory and the market's normalized enough where there's as many buyers as there are sellers.
Yep.
We're sitting in a 5-6 month supply.
Balanced
and things
market.
are balanced and steady.
Yep.
And the average property sells in the average amount of time. And we've talked about the fact that that's been a slightly longer period of time, typically 60 to 90 days in previous eras.
Yeah.
Where we are today is a place where the average home isn't necessarily selling in the average amount of time. We know that some are selling super quick.
Yep.
And I believe that what we're about to see in the next 3 to 6 months is that some aren't going to sell, not at all, but they're not going to sell this season.
Yeah.
We are going to
Not
have
in that 60 to 90 day time frame, I really do think.
So there'll be significant. We will
More.
have clients that in the fall coming into the winter will not have sold their home, and they will go expired. Now we haven't seen a lot of expireds over the last 10 years because we had such a deficiency of inventory that unless you had a real dog, anything that entered the market eventually would sell.
Sold. Yeah.
And as we've talked about, it typically sold quickly. So what we have to start shifting away from is the thinking of averages and just selecting prices because it was relatively safe to say, yeah, probably in this price point.
Yeah.
And you could go high. You could inflate the price. The seller could inflate the price, and there was wiggle room for that because the market was so willing to find a way to consume.
In that way, yeah.
And what we've got to start doing is being better consultants and providing not just ranges, but I think empowering clients to think through their pricing strategy given the amount of the bifurcated market that we're in and the potentiality still for a quick sale, a longer sale. I think our whole approach has to change.
I agree.
Pricing has to become more dynamic, and I think consultative is the right word.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 really big primary contextual maybe shifts that I think need to happen in everyone's approach to pricing. And we've got a handful of tips for you guys, and I think some good scripts as well. So I would encourage you to get the resource, take a look at that.
Yeah.
And then Angela, I know that as a function of this, you've got some other stuff that I think you want to pull out of the chest.
Yes.
And recoach and make sure that we get everyone exposed.
So stay tuned for those, yes.
You want to jump into the 3 things?
I do. Let's do it. Let's cover them holistically, and then let's go back and dig into each one. So I think the first step, understand your client's goals. Step 2, establish the competitive landscape. Step 3, empower. You empower, they decide. So step 1, understand your client's goals. What is this all about?
When I think about our previous environment, we showed up and we talked about how we marketed properties and how the market was going.
Yeah.
And then our sellers, we presented a CMA and maybe some comps.
Yep.
And then they selected a price.
And we moved on.
And that was about all we needed to know. In this environment, I think there's some other considerations that we really need to understand about our clients and their situation and what their goals are, and even what their previous experience has been in order to be a proper consultant to them, given the dynamic kind of fluid and shifting environment that we're in, given that what they're principally paying us for is to be a guide and an expert advisor. With that in mind, we really have to learn the skill of understanding them, their situations, their presumptions, their past experience much, much better so that we can actually provide good advice. I suppose the metaphor for this would be showing up to the doctor and the doctor asks you no questions but just prescribes a pill or allows you to pick the pill you want.
That'd be fun. No.
A great doctor is going to really get into your medical history. They're going to understand you, what your needs are.
All the symptoms, all the things.
100%.
Yes.
And I think that's what this is about. So look, price is one of it's the ultimate thing that our clients are interested in. But in many situations, what they're also interested in, and maybe interested is the wrong way to put it, what is as important to them is going to be the speed of the sale, meaning how much time on the market can they actually endure. They've got young kids. Keeping their house clean is a big problem.
They don't want to deal with all the showings for 3 months.
How quickly do we need the sale to happen? Their timeline. At what point during the sales cycle do we absolutely have a hard stop and we have to have a contract or a closing by? That can be as important as price in many situations.
Absolutely.
The terms, we've spent a lot of time talking about how buyers need to adjust their terms or consider their terms in order to in multiple offer situations. Yeah. Well, I think that's just as true for sellers at this point. What flexibility do sellers have in terms? Are they open to contract sales would be a good example. Yeah. But there's a bunch of those. And I think those matter as well. Like what kind of offer we're going to get and what sort of term flexibility we're willing to deal with. To
be open with, yeah.
Well, and that comes down, that's risk then as well. Like how certain does a seller need to be that we're going to get the sale? Or are we open to negotiating through inspections at the risk of potentially losing the buyer? Because to be perfectly honest, the price is more important to us
we have time. There's so many moving factors in that.
And those are just a few examples. Mm-hmm. But I think the key point here is that we're entering into our seller conversations
first and foremost
as consultants.
Yes.
And I think we've just got to brush off the skill is one way to put it, but I would say actually just really focus attention onto honing that skill.
Yeah, ask better questions. Like really get to the heart of what
that's really the key
they're
of it,
out.
isn't it?
Yeah, ask good questions up front. Yes.
I think that's the first step. And then I think sometimes we ask good questions because we've been told that that's what we need to do. I think what we need to do is understand where the questions are going. What are we actually trying to understand here?
Yep. As
we then offer guidance to our clients on how they're going to set a strategy. And I think maybe that's the big point here is we have to be more strategic.
Yeah.
So the second one there, establish the competitive
landscape. Yeah.
I think there's two things I want to say here, and I'll start with the actual definition of a competitive landscape. I think what we need to start understanding is that our sellers need to shift their thinking to understand that how they're positioning their product, their property,
home.
their home for sale, that they're in a competitive environment and they have a desire, they have a goal for their price, they have thoughts on what they bought it for, what they put into the property, and all those things matter. But also in a competitive landscape, those may or may not be relevant.
Absolutely.
What matters in a marketplace, at least insofar as what determines the sale of a home, is going to be how buyers view the property.
Absolutely.
Now, for a long time, that hasn't mattered because there's been such a finite amount of opportunities that really buyers really lost their minds.
Yeah.
And we're willing.
Had to make quick decisions and did crazy things. Yeah.
It's COVID. I need a house. That price makes no sense to me.
But whatever.
Rates are low. I'm going to buy it no matter what. Yep. In this environment, buyers are picky, selective, and they should be.
Should be, yes.
And inventory is only going to climb more. And until we see drastic changes, excuse me, on the demand side, buyers are going to remain selective. So we now need to shift our sellers' thinking to understand that our objective in positioning our property is to see this from the buyer's perspective.
Yep. When we put our home on the market, these are the other things that buyers are going to be considering also. So we need to be really cognizant of those other options.
100%. So my advice on this, guys, is we've learned how to do CMAs, and we've typically done those with sold comps.
Yeah.
And we show people what's sold and what the average price is that they've sold for, and that's given us an average price point, and then we present a range of how to sell our property. And I think that that's perfectly fine. We should run CMAs and we should bring those and sometimes present them. What we need to do that's more important is learn to bring the active competition that we're going to be competing with and learn to lay that out on the table.
Yes.
The way I used to do this is the best ones on the one side of the table and then just stack them across the table, highlighting. So this is property number one. I'm picking this as the first because I think this one's priced really, really well. It's got slightly more square footage, and I'm pretty sure this one's going to sell quickly. Highlight the price, highlight the days on market. Absolutely. So let's look at the others. Property number two, anywhere from 6 to 10 properties.
Yep.
But these are going to be very, very intentionally selected because you know that any buyer that's going to be considering the property that we're about to list is also going to be looking at these properties.
These are competition.
And what our goal is to help our seller take a look at the competitive landscape, start to think about where their property is competing.
Yep.
The silo of your property and your beautiful kitchen counters is wonderful, but you will not be selling your home in a silo. No, that's not the language I would use. What I'm going to say is, guys, here's who we're competing with.
Yep.
Here's your property. Hand them the
hand them their assessor sheet.
And say, guys, where do you think, and I'm pointing at all the properties, where do we need to position your property in order to be appealing and attractive to the buyers that are out in the marketplace, and ensure that we get the offer that we're looking for to get you guys to where you're trying to be by the end of the fall or whatever the timeline is. And I think that's a fundamentally different approach. And the key point here is that what we're not going to win at anymore is looking at average properties that's sold as sold comps and giving people ranges. We are in a dynamic and fluid strategic race. And some people on the table will not win the race. Some of these properties will not sell and will not meet their objective, or will have to chase the market down in the fall. And maybe sell for significantly less because they missed the market. And others will win. And we've got to help our seller understand, well, and not even understand, we've got to help them make the decision of where they need to be in order to ensure they're on the winning side of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really like the word competitive there, because this is what we're competing with, right? We have to be strategic about where we position our house and relative to those. So the other piece of establishing the competitive landscape is then also market absorption. I think this is a super important conversation for context to have with your sellers.
Well, I think we've forgotten this skill, and we've forgotten this because it hasn't been relevant. When everything is at a 1 or 2 month supply, the truth is buyers are buying. And if you have a property to sell, trust me, we're good. What would you like to price it at?
What do you think?
And then they would pick a price, and sometimes it was high, and it didn't matter, because even if it was high, maybe we'd have to adjust it, but you'd still probably get offers. And the bigger question was, well, would it be multiple or would it not?
Would it not? Yes.
And we felt like a failure if there wasn't
multiple offers.
If there wasn't multiple. Guys, where we're at is a place where some properties are sitting in hyper-local sub-markets or micro-markets that they are still 1 or 2 months supply. There's very few of those left.
But
they are
some out there.
And we have other properties that are sitting in 8 to 12 months supply.
Which is a completely fundamentally different market.
We cannot think of this as the Des Moines market or the Waverly market. Within each of these markets are subsets of what's going on, and we have to use this measurement, this metric, as a guide to help tell a better story for our clients. And the reason market absorption is so powerful is because it's a metric that accounts for, it's very holistic in its approach. It takes into account buyer and buyer demand. And it takes into account sellers and the supply. And it puts them together into a marriage that it's just a number, but it's a very, very important number, because it's going to give us a very holistic understanding of the environment, the competitive environment that we're sitting at, the current rate of sale, how long is it going to take for buyers to buy up all the inventory, assuming nothing more enters the marketplace. And it's not the only data point we need, but my strong encouragement to you guys is, as we lay out all the properties, as we look at the competitive landscape, market absorption analysis done at a hyper-local level, meaning you've got to pull out the market absorption spreadsheet. You've got to run through the data. You've got to create that and use it as a storytelling tool to help our sellers understand what is the current month supply, and explain what that means relative to a normalized market of 5 to 6 months, and how does that compare to the market as a whole?
It's the umbrella for which then the competitive landscape conversation can then have a point of reference, right? So that it informs your strategy.
And I understand that a lot of our people probably have forgotten or have not taken seriously using that market absorption analysis. I can tell you that, what was it, a decade ago when we first created this? It was essential. It was absolutely essential to every single consultative conversation that we had. And it was the center of the story. And I think that we haven't needed to use it as much. I'm telling you, this is the time to figure this out again. So if you need to jump into a training or something, please do prioritize.
Stay tuned for that. And we do have resources for that as well. But I will say, not only does it help you have a really great consultative conversation with your sellers, the amount of research you have to do in putting this together, it really shapes your understanding of what's happening as well. So it's really helpful for both. Let me jump into that. Third, and I think this is where we're going, right? So we've teed all that up. We've understood their motivations. We have talked about the competitive landscape and given them an idea with market absorption. Now, step 3, you empower, they decide. That's the key point, is they get to decide.
I think the misunderstanding in the market that's always existed is that one of the ways you interview agents,
Yes.
you ask them how they're going to market the property, and then you ask them the price at which they're going to market the property.
Mm-hmm.
And for many, many, many years, sellers have considered that one of the ways you select your agent is based upon that price.
Yep.
And so years ago, we taught
Never
a
lose a
class,
listing.
never lose a listing, how to never lose a listing on
based
price.
on price. Yep.
And the impetus of that was we don't present the price we're going to present the property to the market at. We empower our clients to make an informed decision of how they're going to present their property.
Yes, yeah.
And I think we need to remind ourselves of this. We are consultants. They are not hiring us to tell them
a price, a number.
Price. What they're looking for is a guide and an expert advisor to provide, and this is key, not just the information, but a storyline and a narrative and a context for them to pick. Some of them are going to want it done quick, and the information you're going to give them is going to help them clearly see, wait,
this is how we're going to do it, to do that.
We have to be competing against these one or two, because if we aren't, we can clearly see that those are more attractive and ours is going to fall to the back. And others are going to recognize, wait, I've got time, because you helped me realize that in the consultative initial portion of our conversation.
Yep.
I've got time, I'm flexible, and I'm willing to try a slightly higher price point.
Yep.
But the primary context here for me isn't don't lose the listing because you present the wrong price. The primary context here is that in the environment that we're in, we have to be consultants, and we have to recognize that there's there's just a silly risk that you take on by being deterministic or particular about predictive pricing. Mm-hmm. And I think there's way too much fluidity. There's way too much, back to the bifurcated market.
You don't know which path.
Maybe that's the best way to say it.
Yes, it really is.
You can't know.
Yeah.
And I think there's environments where we can be pretty certain what a property is going to sell at. In this environment, I don't think that we've got enough data to understand how the market's going to react to certain properties.
Yes.
And so this isn't a CYA. I'm not suggesting don't create liability for yourself. I'm not saying chicken out and don't be a guide and tell them what they need to hear. I am saying that when you can't be certain, then the smarter thing to do is give them the information to create a good starting point so that we can be intelligent and reactive and work with the market to see how it responds to ultimately find the point at which we're going to get the reaction we want, which is an offer.
Yeah. And I know you guys are thinking, well, but oftentimes my clients then look at me and they go, well, but you're the professional. What would you do? So I feel like there's really good scripts on here, but I think you need to be prepared for that. But there's a way to answer that still without giving them a price. So maybe run through an example of that.
Yeah. They do say that,
yeah,
right?
They're going to look at you and be like, what would you do? I don't know.
Because here's the information. Yeah. Where do you want to position the property? Here's a couple of different ranges. And they say, well, I don't know. You're the professional. And I think the way you handle that is to say, well, look, guys, here's how I understand the situation. At the end of the day, it's your call, and I'm here to help you. But it sounds like if you really, really want to prioritize getting the property sold by the fall so you can get the kids in school or whatever the story is,
right,
then it does seem like we really need to be competing with these first two properties, and we probably need to be in that range to ensure we're going to get the timeline you're looking for.
Yes.
But it also sounded like at one point, maybe you guys are considering the possibility that it's okay if you had to open enroll for a season or something like that. And if that was true and you wanted to instead maximize price, then I do think it's not stupid. You wouldn't be making a mistake to try here with this caveat. If we tried here, we have to be very vigilant in that first week or two, see how the market responds, and then adjust and make adjustments if we need to. So what they're looking for, guys, is not a number. What they're looking for is, am I doing something stupid?
Yeah.
And I think the best words you can use is like, I would, is very, very powerful. Or something like, hey, if I was in your shoes, based upon what I know, I do still think there's a couple options for you here.
Here's
Either this ups and downs, pros and cons, or this ups and downs, pros and cons.
100%.
And you're gonna see clarity emerge, and you're gonna see empowerment through that. And I really do believe that's what they're paying you for.
Absolutely, that is. I mean, yeah, LRC. I will throw that out there as well, giving them the options for them to make the choice. I think that's so good.
And I think it's important to state at this point as well that what we're not doing here, we must remind them that our ultimate goal here in selecting this initial price isn't to pick the price that we're going to market the property at.
And it's going to be perfect.
We're picking a starting point to see how the market reacts. And what that does is it lowers the bar. It lowers the bar for you. You don't have to be perfect on the initial starting point. Neither do they.
Neither do they.
We need to be fluid and reactive, and we need to react to how the market responds to our property.
And we'll see what happens. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that changes the conversation.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we have the 5 tips for pricing like a consultant. Some of these are kind of a repeat of what we've covered, but I think they're just really key to go ahead and cover. So number 1, start with the seller's goals. I think we've talked about that one already.
Yeah, ask better questions. Be a consultant. The first 20, 30 minutes of your conversation needs to be just truly understanding them, what matters to them, what their priorities are. Again, previous experience is a big one on this.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to uncover hidden assumptions or expectations that they have.
Yeah. Next, present market context, which I love this, not just comps, right? They have to understand what's happening in this current environment.
Yeah. People don't make decisions through facts and data. Facts and data are the right thing to present.
You need to have them.
But it's actually storytelling that influences people's thinking. And so I think that what we need to learn to do is tell better stories. And when I talk about laying the active comps out on the table and saying, hey guys, where do you want to position? And if these two, and then as one sells and we remove that one, we say, guys, the competitive landscape's changed. We now have a couple more. This is storytelling. And what it's doing is creating a frame of reference or a viewpoint, right?
Yes.
For a seller to look at the data that isn't, but this is the number I want.
Yep.
It's pulling them out of their shoes into another point of view.
Yep.
And it's empowering them to make good decisions.
Again, that's exactly where I was going, is empowering them.
Be a storyteller. And I think that's what we mean by market context.
Yes, absolutely. Next, number 3, position against actives. We kind of talked about this one as well. Not just solds. The actives really matter in this space.
Solds are a lagging indicator, and they are important. They tell us what the market has been willing to pay. There are certain markets where all the actives, if we compete, if we're the number 1 active, we're the first property in the list, no one's better than us. We've got more square footage and a lower price. There are certain markets where that still doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nothing is selling. We lived this market in 2008, 9, and 10.
Yep.
So there are contexts where actives aren't the most important data point. Solds are, because what actually buyers paid is the more relevant data point. And sometimes there's a gap between those two things. But in this market, that's not the case. In this market, solds are a lagging indicator of what buyers paid, and it shows us what's real. But it's shifting. Mm-hmm. It's shifting every single month, and it's going to shift as the seasons continue. And so land that anchor and then move on to the competitive landscape of actives. This is going to tell us what we need to do to win in the next 60 days.
And again, better storytelling for context, right? Number 4, present pricing as fluid and strategic. I love these 2 words, fluid and strategic.
Fluid, meaning the landscape is shifting. Mm-hmm. And I do think that as we lay out the landscape, we need to understand that as we move every week, and we're going there next as we talk about our communication strategy with our clients, we're going to reset the landscape. 1 or 2 are going to have sold, probably, hopefully, if you were smart, the first 2 on your list will have sold now.
Yeah.
And then
that is an indicator.
But what's also going to have happened is others are going to have entered the market. And sometimes the ones that are entering the market are going to be even more aggressive than yours. And what that means is we need to understand that our price that we picked is a starting point, but we move with the market. It's a fluid environment. We have to be reactive. And pricing is strategic. I think what we mean by this is...
we're not just willy-nilly making decisions.
Well, the game I'm thinking about is poker.
Yeah.
I mean... your hand matters, but what also matters is what's on the table, and what also matters is what other
everybody
people
else have
in
in
the
their
room
hand.
are doing.
Yep.
And that's the difference between I'm just going to play my hand versus I'm going to play the room. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're talking about. We have to understand in a fluid, dynamic, shifting, bifurcated market, we have to read the room.
Yep. That's very good. And the last one, number 5, I want you to explain this one. Frame responsiveness as leadership.
We need to understand for ourselves, and we need to embed into the psychology of our sellers that a price reduction is not a price reduction. We need to just frankly lose the
Yeah,
language.
I don't like that word. Yeah.
We have a starting point. We're going to see how the market reacts and responds, and then we're going to make
going to
adjustments.
adjust, yes.
Adjusting quickly and adjusting strategically isn't somehow being wrong, first of all.
It's not failure.
And it's not failing. It's moving smartly with a moving market in order to ensure that the buyers that are out there are looking at our property and that we get selected.
Yeah, very good. And I would highly encourage, again, follow along, get this resource in front of you. There's some really good dialogues and scripts on here. And then stay tuned, right? Like I want to dig in more in other spaces on market absorption again and the listing consultation itself, and really kind of digging into how we go about those things, because there's just so much in here.
That's a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But I think that's the goal. I don't think that we can reteach pricing in an hour or 30 minutes.
Nope.
Or frankly, a week. So I do think I'd like you guys to think of this as chapter 1.
Yes.
I think we've got weeks, months, and years of work to do.
Because it's not going away. I feel like this is the journey we're on.
Who knows what the market's going to do? But it certainly seems like the tide has turned enough to say that the 10 years that we've been in, where sellers by definition were in control, and buyers had to be Johnny on the spot and reactive and do whatever they had to do to win, that chapter has closed. I don't know that we're moving into a negative market. I don't think we are. I don't think we're moving to a place, frankly, where buyers gain all the upper hand. I think that there's fluidity to where we're headed next.
Yeah.
And that's going to be dependent on rates and all sorts of other geopolitical things going on right now. But I can confidently say that the old era is gone. And I can say that no matter what, we're going to have to be better at these sorts of things. We're going to have to be better consultants. We're going to have to ask better questions. We're going to have to brush off market absorption and use that as a measurement again. We're going to have to think through our pricing conversations to be far more about empowering people to make decisions and far less about just picking numbers out of the sky. That used to work. It won't work in the future. And so, there's a lot to be done here. I think this is the beginnings, and I'm excited to see what you guys can pull out in Reconnect and other conversations, team meetings, because I don't think there's anything more. Look, there's a lot of things we do to help our clients, but guiding them through this conversation, we understand is probably, well, I'm going to say it this way. It's the most important marketing tool we have for selling a home. Yeah,
walking in the door and being able to truly just consult, right? Be a professional.
And help our clients self-realize a very sometimes fun, sometimes a very hard, cold truth. Reality about what they need to do. And it's LRC through and through, leadership, relationship, creativity. It is the number one thing we're paid for. And so I'm excited for you guys for us as a collective and a team, brush off the skills. I really want to think of this as leading the marketplace.
Yeah.
Our colleagues, we tend to be a little ahead on this stuff.
Yep.
And I do believe the market will figure this out, and sellers will adjust in time, and prices will settle, and it'll be a more normal space. But in this next 12 months, us leading the chase on providing great consultative conversations,
it's going to help you win. I mean, in the long run, for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking through that.
Yeah.
We'll see you in a week for chapter 4.
Yep.
This is great to talk through. Thanks for listening, guys.